Everyone they can ask people. So, another. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hello. It's all right. I've got everyone here now. Lovely to see you all. Great, that you've come back to do Shakespeare again. So it's lovely to have again to welcome Daniel Sowelu. Welcome. And he's he's well known for his evolutionary psychotherapist. He's experimental astrology. So here we are tonight. We're going to looking forward to seeing Juno and Pluto, of course. Yeah. It's going to be here in the sky tonight, so it's very apt that you're talking all about it. So put your hands together and welcome back. See you all. Do you want to do an intro or anything, or do you want me to just bring your slides up?
Yeah, if you could
bring them up.
Yes, please.
Hold on.
Okay, so I can.
Hi, it's already up.
All right.
And you should be able to just use these to get. You can use that button to go to the next slide.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, yeah, okay. Thank you for coming out, those of you who are here in person. And thanks to everybody at home. Lovely to have a good-sized group. Yeah, tonight.
To admit there.
Sorry?
One to admit.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
Please. See that?
I can't see it on here.
You can't see it on. Not there. It's not on the screen. I should be able to switch. Sorry, guys at home. We're just trying to allow somebody in that's joined late, but having a tech issue here to be able to see them. Can't see them. Maybe I think you just keep going.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. Pluto and Juno conjunct in Aquarius. Now, why I chose to speak about this is that every week I do this 5-minute video called Cosmic Compass on Facebook and Insta. And it's a snapshot of the heavens, for each week. And it's just a bit of fun. But back in March, I saw that here's the goddess of marriage, Juno, crossing over Pluto. And I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty powerful transit. It's usually a fairly short one. But it kept on happening. Each week it was hanging around. And in truth, they've been within 5 degrees of each other virtually the whole year, with specific peaks, one in April, one last week, and a final one in October, November. So in the midst of, the cacophony of, the 3 outer planets all hanging together, combining all their different powers, amidst that whole deconstruction, reconstruction process has been this thread that talks about the transformation of marriage on lots of different levels. And yet the little twist of it is the whole thing is happening in Aquarius, which is an interesting sign in terms of committed relationships because of a certain ambivalence that the sign has, and also because of the revolutionary aspect of both Aquarius and Uranus. So we've got this deep Plutonian process happening around the institution of marriage. It's psychology, it's spirituality, sexuality, and astrologically. And it's a thread within this whole year as part of this broader transformation that the whole planet's under. So and I've been watching it, and because as most of you know, I'm a therapist, and I get a lot of feedback from clients who are colleagues as well. And the number of clients amongst my colleague friends who are very challenged on the relationship front or are actually leaving long-term relationship. So there's something quite cool about that. So this is what I want to talk to you about tonight. And I'm doing it from a place of I'm not going to give you a full astrological analysis of the whole thing, but I want to flesh out some of the different layers of this process. So if it's not personal to you, at least you know that some of your clients are going to be going through it. And hopefully this is information you'll be able to share. Okay. Yeah. Hang on, what's happening there?
Do you want to change your screen?
I was
So I can't let in on my home.
I was shifting to the next.
Just this one.
Now back again. Yeah, that's
Not changing on the screen. Oh, I think it's changing.
hang in with us, folks.
Yeah. We're on your PowerPoint.
There's the share green.
Yeah, that's the screen. That's showing the one. It's showing that screen. We could try it.
It's not easy to hear.
Do you want to go close?
Someone's waiting to join us.
Yeah, we can't let her in. It's changing.
How do you?
I can't let her in now.
Basketball, it is.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the things I want to do first is to some work that I've been doing around the whole notion of relationship evolution, and particularly working through the different layers of archetypes. As we know, in traditional astrology, we talk about relationships and sexuality. And of course, we have to start with Venus and Mars. However, Venus and Mars are not the be-all and end-all of our relationship evolution. In fact, they are the starters. Like they're amazing archetypes, great archetypes in their own right, but they're also the raw material for ongoing processes around relationship, evolution, transformation. Now, and this is particularly relevant to me as an experiential astrologer because and as an advocate of the sacred marriage, Shiva Shakti relationship, of constantly evolving relationship that contributes to relationship, and relationship is a vehicle for. So some of the schematas I've kind of created, and it depends on your the cultures that you feel most connected to. But in these three scenarios, we're all starting with Venus and Mars. If we pursue the Greco-Roman model, where the next movement, evolutionary movement, is to Eros and Psyche as higher octaves of Venus and Mars, more refined versions of Venus and Mars. And as you know, they're the son and daughter-in-law of the two. So they represent moving beyond Venus and Mars into a much more subtle, or to a certain extent, a more mystical place. There's that much greater openness to the ecstasy of passion in Eros, and to Psyche, who's like a mixture of Venus and Neptune. So there's a refinement as well as an elevation of energy. And then in most systems, and in the West, then we meet Jupiter and Juno. And theoretically, that should be a forward step. However, if you got sucked into the Greeks and Romans version of, particularly around Juno, Juno's got a greater reputation for her vengefulness than as a goddess, a queenly goddess of love in committed relationship. And so I want to drop a bombshell on that straight away. It's a minimalization of a queen and a very noble, wise, powerful, and gracious form of the feminine beyond that Greco-Roman model, if you like. Yeah. Now, in the West, you might be happy to leave it there. And that's certainly a great place. The kind of relationships that really acknowledge and act fully the Jupiter and the Juno. You think of Obama and Michelle. You think of, to a certain extent, Kennedy and Jackie Onassis. You know who I mean. Those of a certain age. So that's a brilliant model for evolved, mature, connected relationship. However, compared to some of the Eastern models, there's a relatively mundane aspect of that. Whereas on the evolutionary spectrum, we can move beyond that. And in fact, that's even intimated in the Juno story, because the mystery schools amongst the devotees of Juno practiced a Western form of Tantra. So even in this Greco-Roman model, the Eastern mystical model was kind of there, but as a mystery school. So this speaks of potentially Jupiter and Juno is a leaping into other realms. And this is where I tend, because I'm a lover of the Shiva Shakti traditions, I tend to move towards, Shiva and Parvati as the ultimate sacred marriage. And if you like yogic, mystical versions of Jupiter and Juno. So I just want to plant these seeds. What is consistent about all of them is that in the middle, there are points of major challenge. You've got to pass through either the dark goddesses or Pluto, Persephone experience as part of the evolutionary cycle. And so with Juno and Pluto together, collectively, we're in the middle of that next transition. And it's kind of neat that it's in Aquarius, because Aquarius has that capacity to step beyond the normal, the mundane. Yeah. Anyhow, that's just a little theme I wanted to share with you to plant. Okay. Still having trouble with this?
Moving up there.
Oh, okay.
We're sharing that spring.
Oh. Um, okay, Juno. Sure, yeah, goddess of marriage, consort of Jupiter, protector of the sanctity of marriage. Like, it's not just, a legal, this is protecting the boundary of connected, truly deep, connected, mature relationship. So she is a model for a powerful woman who wants to be met. And the trouble with the Greco-Roman model is that Zeus is hardly a kingly expression of the masculine. He's more like a randy adolescent who's constantly trying to escape his mother. He has that quality, which is what pisses her off so much. She does have connections with warrior energy, but again, it's the Greco-Roman model. She can take on certain aspects of Pallas Athena, for instance. But as a queen of heaven, like, she's a distributor of grace, of good fortune, of benevolence. Yeah, so that often gets lost in some of the literature. She is a feminine form of Jupiter in all his magnificence. Yeah. And obviously deeply committed to a relationship. Okay. So in our charts, she represents that drive, that longing in each of us, depending on our authentic nature, for relationship that is authentic to ourselves, and committed relationship, whatever that means. Yeah. And the ideal is, relationship based on honesty, mutual respect. And if you're really into this notion of relationship as a vehicle for spiritual growth, she is a total yes to that. Yeah. Which is another reason she feels so traumatized by the violation of that, the integrity of that, her bond. And she should be treated like a queen. All of those who are wives, you should be treated like a queen. Psychologically, her position also reflects what I've come to call marriage conditioning. Like, on some level, all of us absorb some of the energetic dynamics of our parents' marriage. And uncomfortably, sometimes we wake up to the fact that we may well have been repeating some of those patterns in our adult relationships. That's a necessary rite of passage, because that's the beginning of learning to break through dynamics, patterns, templates for committed relationship that aren't authentic to us, that don't suit us, but we're acting out a family system dynamic. It's also infused with collective conditioning. It's also infused with religious conditioning. There's a whole barrel of stuff that we're trying to create healthy relationship from. And this is the stuff that Pluto will go after. dismantling that. That's part of the necessary process of transforming the whole system. All right. Can we see that picture? Okay. Have a look at this. From an experiential astrology point of view, what happens to you immediately as you look at this? What are you aware of in your body? What are you drawn to? What does it bring up?
Regal. It's like, yeah, it's hard to read regal.
Regal.
Contrast.
Yeah.
What was that?
Contrast.
Beauty of the beast.
Yeah, there's an element in that. You know how the supposed nice girls like the dangerous boys? Now, even though they are light and dark, what's the feeling between?
Well, don't forget the people online.
Timothy type of energy, you know, they're not really together. They're together, but they're not together.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
It's like an arranged marriage kind of thing.
As astrologically enforced marriage. Okay, we're going to come back to this because just wanted to get your.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, what's the connection between Neptune and Juno?
It's not Neptune. It's not Neptune.
It's not Neptune.
Neptune doesn't have goals.
No, it is a different style of shot.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I was also reading that in a Neptunian way.
They're brothers.
Well,
But getting more like it's like the undertake.
It's a scorpion.
But then the
no, no, it's a kind of trident.
That's very obvious.
It's really headed.
Trident actually comes from the more ancient Shiva tradition. And Shiva is Pluto.
Yes.
And Pluto is Shiva. Neptune is an aspect of Shiva. Yeah, Neptune represents the mystical dimension of Shiva. Pluto represents Shiva, god of death and rebirth and transformation. Yeah. So yeah, the trident appears in and out in the system. Right? But yeah. But here's his three dogs, for instance. That kind of gives it away.
Only one dog, isn't it? It's right there.
Yeah. Is it Cerberus? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're going to look at four different layers. Okay, how's this going to impact outer relationship? We're going to look at what the psychology of the processes are, what are the spiritual dimensions of it, and come back to the astrology if we've got time. Okay.
I think you can be forward though. It's easier for you to bring the whole thing and then you can see behind you with it. On table forward.
Yeah, that works.
And then you've got more kind of room behind you there.
Two.
Yeah, right.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Okay, layers of influence. Firstly, whether you're aware of it or not, everyone is under a fair degree of collective stress. You know, we've got the three majors that are pushing us on all different fronts. It's part of the chaos, but it's also part of, you know, a grand, long-term transformation of our culture. Okay. Within that is this part, and part of that stress, for some of us more than others, is stress on our primary relationships, particularly in terms of what's working and what's not. Yeah. And for those of us who are getting, you know, this particular conjunction, you know, in strong places in the chart, this is some of which will come through. And because Pluto represents the deepest of transformations, it's going to dredge up some of our deepest traumas, some of our deepest fears, at the very least contribute to the collective anxiety, because the feeling is the ground under our feet is not quite as solid as it was. And in our relationships, our core relationships may be at least challenged, if not in difficulty. Yeah. Yeah, what happens with Pluto is that some relationships will end. It's inevitable. Yeah. But as a rule of thumb, Pluto will go after those aspects of our relationships that are inauthentic, that are not working. And if the dynamics in our core relationships are rigid and stagnant and resistant to change, then Pluto often has to come in harder. It's something that happens energetically. If your relationship is in a good place, and it's still psychologically solid, yeah, that there's not too much trauma, you know, kind of contaminating or influencing the connection. And if the relationship is still karmically right and dharmically right, the karma that is, okay, there's important karmic reasons why we need to be together, and that notion of dharma, okay, what does our relationship bring to the world? What does the dynamics in the relationship contribute to my ability to fulfill my roles, my karmic and dharmic roles in this life? Because particularly when Pluto is involved, he's not just after, you know, transforming things. He's after preparing us to be potentially agents of transformation. And in order to do that, he and the so-called dark goddesses have to really work some of our inauthentic places where we're running on conditioning, or where we're caught in patriarchal structured traps. He's going to go after the lot. And that's really challenging for the average mortal, whether they're conscious of it or not. Yeah.
There's a financial thing that people go through at the moment, the Pluto connection to finance. And
I think it's a value system one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
but the actual cost of petrol, the concern about the petrol, you know, the price, and
It's all a stress creation mess. Yeah. So, okay, so what's he going to go after? One of the things about Pluto, Shiva, the dark goddesses, is they want to cut through our bullshit. our denial, our unconsciousness, the denial of naivety. You know, how many of us had stories in our early relationships where we were doing what we believed was going to be right for us, and then lo and behold, at some stage, we wake up to the fact that, oh shit, the world I've created, the relationship I'm in, doesn't suit the person I'm becoming. So this is the material that Pluto will go after. That notion of relationship templates that don't belong to us, and some of that absorption happens as early as our conception. Conception is one of those holographic points where a lot of transgenerational influences move in, where our parents are at in their relationship, where they're at financially, sexually, all that 8th house territory. So the conditioning is deep and it's cellular. So this is why some of us will be getting some pretty weird stuff happening in our bodies. Anyone fit that category? Yeah? Because there's all sorts of movement on every level. Yeah, the educational use of pain, that sounds like Saturn, doesn't it? But with Saturn on steroids in many ways. Facing our shadows, our primal fears, the abandonment stuff is huge, particularly with Uranus and Sedna hanging out together. Big issues there. And which is why some of us are having very old traumas revisiting, things that we worked on in the past, but have shown up on a whole different level of depth, of potency, of and sometimes being assaulted by older traumas. Whether they are technically our own or that which we've absorbed. So yeah, the encouragement is to, around this territory, this level, is not just to go into therapy. And when I talk about therapy with this level, it's not the analytical stuff. Superficial counselling is always helpful, but this stuff, you've got to work with the body and the emotions. This is Pluto. Lower chakras, gut, body, bottom half of the body. Emotions in general, primal emotions, and the lost parts of the being feminine. Because even though in the West, Pluto isn't known as a great feminist, he will move territory around it. This is where the Shiva is a much more rounded figure of these deities of transformation. Okay. Right. The spiritual level. This is where it gets a little bit more exciting, or at least for me. It's a bugger. I can't see the screen. I have to keep turning around. Okay. On many levels, as I've already said, our relationships are an expression of our longing for union. And not just in a simple sense. It's like, there's a deep longing, not just for average relationship, but for that soul-to-soul union, whether we're conscious of it or not. And this is where average relationship is so disappointing, because we feel we intuit at times there's something greater. Now, I'm not a great fan of, going totally cosmic around twin flames and soulmates. I believe it, but I'm, as a therapist, I'm a little cynical. Yeah. Because in order to get to that reality, we often have to move through the other stuff before we can fully know it. Yeah. And this is why the psychological realm is so important. Because, New Ageism tends to want to avoid that tougher territory and go straight there, but with very mixed results. But when the layers are worked together, then that's when things get really, really awesome on every level. So as we can talk about moving beyond Venus and Mars, even Jupiter, Juno. As I said, Eros and Psyche. It's worthwhile reading some of the really good interpretations of their myths. The Jungian Robert Johnson wrote 3 great books, He, We, and She. And one of them had the Eros and Psyche myth described very beautifully. Really worth checking out. The Shiva Shakti, in many ways, in that tradition of it, is the union of sacred masculine, sacred feminine within ourselves, and hopefully having that reflected in our outer relationships. And the vision of that is that it's not about finding the perfect mate. It's about finding someone who is equally committed to work their own territory, to own their trauma, to own their projections, to take responsibility for the wounded child, to do that so your partner doesn't have to carry the weight of unconscious expectations, so that 2 people are evolving individually, and out of that they generate an energy that supports the evolution of the relationship and vice versa. That's the ultimate kind of vision. So it's not a static goal, it's a work in progress. And this is what I love most about the Shiva Shakti traditions. And this is where Pluto will come in and test out our theories, our astrology, test out our projections, test out the validity of both our relationships, but also our expectations around relationships. Because ultimately, he and Juno are about getting to the raw truth of things. Because it's only from that place that any real transformation can happen. But then you've got to have both individuals equally committed. And that's tricky for people who have, say, Chiron around their relationship archetypes or in their 7th house. There's lots of entanglements there with other people's woundedness. Pluto will go after that and cut cords on those kind of dynamics, because there's such power imbalances there. Does that make sense? Yep, did a bit of a jump there. Okay. Anyone want to ask a question or make comments so far?
So, Daniel, I'm just still interested about that 3-headed dog in the image.
Yeah.
And I was reminded of Bernini's sculpture in the Villa Borghese, the Rape of Persephone. Yeah, Persephone. Yeah, with the three-headed dog there. So what's the deal there with the three-headed dog? I mean,
Isn't he a protector?
Yeah, it guards the gates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he has resonances with Medusa. Kind of guards the portholes so the uninitiated can't enter into the deeper realms, because to enter the deeper realms involves dying if you're not ready. Yeah, I suspect it's that kind of level. The dogs warn people off getting too close unless they're really ready to step into that kind of depth, or to undergo a psychological or spiritual version of the death and rebirth cycle. Does that answer your question?
thank you.
Yeah, and I think the dog also represents, like in different mythologies, dharma. The dog also represents like Anubis, yeah, the carrier of the soul. Yeah, so the whole analogies of metaphors.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
And it's going to be this conjunction is exactly aspected by the full moon tonight
Yes.
and totally activated
Yes.
by that.
And the conjunction is
That's
part
it.
of Babel's basket.
Yeah, it is. Totally is.
So this conjunction is not in isolation. It's pinging all over the place and getting supportive energies from all over the place. This is why it's so huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a Pluto moon conjunction.
Okay. The other great thing spiritually, anytime you're working with Pluto or Shiva or the dark goddesses, they're going to help us heal the schisms between upper and lower halves of our body, between upper and lower chakras. Yeah. Because our spiritual life is always going to be lopsided if we're either too much up here or too much down here. It's about both. And in some ways, Juno and Pluto represent both. You know, the other obvious theme, which I haven't highlighted enough, is okay. We've been talking about, okay, there's the deconstruction, there's that tough part of the transformation, but Pluto, particularly combined with Juno, is about empowerment, empowering relationship, bring our individual empowerment to relationship. And when we're talking about empowerment a la Pluto, it's not an egocentric one. It's an empowerment that comes because you know yourself well enough, you've done enough shadow work to allow these greater powers to move through you and to infuse what you bring to the world, particularly amongst those of you who are practitioners. Anytime Pluto is active and the dark goddesses, they are the best preparations for working more and more deeply with our clients, whatever our modality. And that's where Pluto-Juno can also represent not just intimate relationship, but professional relationships, between therapist and client, between practitioner and client. So it's not just the intimate realm that's been focused here. That's right. One of the great arts in relationships is learning, getting good at owning your projections as quickly as possible. You can do that for yourself and do that for your partner. It makes things so much different. So it makes things so different. Yeah. So this is an art form that things like Pluto and Juno combined will support us with? What shadows are operating? What is sabotaging our love, our connection, our intimacy? And calling in those powers as we can now with this conjunction to work the territory. There's great opportunities. Okay.
Juno comes into opposition with Pluto about the 19th of May 2028, just 2 months before the eclipse of Australia. At the same time that Uranus is 9 degrees Gemini, 9 degrees, the immediate degree.
Okay. Interesting.
So
we'll be revisiting these themes.
Yeah, it's unfolding up, it's kind of like Inanna, the very goddess Inanna going to the undergone and coming back.
On. Yeah. Okay. Now it gets even more interesting, the sexual level. This combination can literally transform a person's sex life. Primarily because, as I explain in these notes, Pluto is, we've been taught that Pluto is predominantly masculine. But even as far back as the 70s, Stephen Arroyo pointed out the research was showing Pluto had far more to do with the feminine and far more to do with our mothers than our fathers. So how I see Pluto now is being both masculine and feminine, Pluto and Persephone, or if you like, which I prefer, Shiva and Kali, because each archetype are agents of transformation and rebirth. Yeah, it just so happens that those archetypes are at the core of what we now know as Tantra. That ancient tradition, which is primarily inner, bringing the masculine and feminine together within ourselves, but which also has automatic consequences in terms of our relationships. So the fact that Juno has a secret Western form of Tantra and Pluto, Shiva, rules the lower chakras and the transformative processes in our body. That's kind of saying, well, this is a tantric union, literally. And I'm sharing this from experience. I was working with one of my apprentices, and part of that work is we swap sessions, and I got to do an astro drama between Juno and Pluto. This was only a few days ago, and so we set it up so that I was embodying each of these archetypes and then reversing roles from one into the other and interacting verbally. And then at the completion of it, of actually, and this is in the experiential astrology circle, that magic wheel. And so when we brought the Juno and Pluto symbols together to complete the process, and I'm standing over it, I had this full-blown experience, which is kind of, like these kind of whole-body, organic, cathartic experiences. And I was standing there, and one of the symbols for Juno is that diadem. In this experience, I became that diadem, and it exploded into this ecstasy, like this huge flower. And so I'm just standing there having this full body experience where I'm supremely grounded, and yet this bliss absolute bliss. And it was the bliss of Juno, empowered by the energies of Pluto. That was just freaking awesome. Yeah. So it kind of gave me a taste of what I was expecting. So what else spiritually? Yeah, it can impact the quality of your orgasms, but also to roll into those kind of organic places. But more importantly, and this is my experience, like I'm just having that fully embodied. The other great thing is if you manage to be initiated in any way through this, or awakened in some way spiritually or sexually, the nature of this power is that anyone who interacts with you, whether sexually or in any other emotionally or energetic intimacy, there's going to be this transition of Shakti. There's going to be greater capacity of that to happen. And this is what I was saying about, this is preparing us to be better astrologers, better facilitators, better therapists, whatever our favorite modality. Okay. So, why are we talking about this now? Well, I've forgotten that the moon is holding conjunction, right? However,
In 10 minutes, it's exact conjunction.
in 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, more or less, a bit more than 10 minutes.
There it is.
There's a Jupiter Casimir.
The Jupiter.
Jupiter Casimir.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what is Juno? This is a question for you. We talked a lot about the Plutonian process. This is just a few notes about what I suspect Juno is contributing to Pluto. Anyone got any other ideas around that? Here's this queenly aspect of quite golden feminine, and she's relating strongly to this dark, somewhat creature.
Sorry, Daniel, don't move too far from the screen because they can't hear you.
Thank you. So yeah, that's worthwhile having a think about. What will the goddess of marriage contribute to the actions of Pluto? I mentioned the great myth of Shiva and Parvati in India. And Parvati was born to a mountain king, and she knew even as a little girl that she was meant to marry the great god Shiva. And she grows up into this beautiful young woman, of course. But Shiva is this great yogi. He's an ascetic. He's beyond the world. He pisses off into the Himalayas and falls into meditation for millions of years. And the only way, and this worried the other gods, because Pluto was supposed to be destroying things so that things could be created. So the whole wheel of creativity wasn't working because Shiva wasn't on his job. And they realized the only way they could wake him up is to get some gorgeous woman who was powerful enough to bring him out of meditation. And there's an initial tryout, tried to wake him up, and which didn't work, ended badly. But Parvati was so committed to the relationship that she went off and did intense spiritual practices. Some say for thousands of years. This is God time. And in the end, out of doing these intense yogic practices, she became so powerful. She accumulated so much Shakti, the sacred power of the feminine, that eventually he felt her from deep meditation and was awakened in a way, or reawakened. And so he comes out of meditation and he comes down into engagement in the world. And they create the ultimate relationship. The really neat thing is that by the time she's become that powerful, she doesn't need him. But she's his absolute equal. And I know a lot of women really love that. It's like, yes. So there's a kind of a correspondence here. It's like Pluto is a scary beast in some ways. And so here's this, there's the beauty in the beast thing, isn't it? It's like here's this gorgeous aspect of the feminine who is potent enough to risk relation to. Yeah. And the last point, Pluto, along with Black Moon, along with Hygeia, they're all agencies of intense purification of toxins, rage, bitterness, vengefulness, and so worked with then clears the way for more and more of this other stuff to come through. And then in the Shiva Shakti traditions, there are meditations, mantras, visualizations, so very specific work on particularly the Indian forms of these archetypes. Now, why I'm bringing that up, we're not just talking about the conjunctions. I'll get it right by the end. Part of the reason I see this as so important is because this is all happening, particularly we had the last conjunction last week in the middle of Babolt's basket. And so this is not just Pluto conjunct Juno. It's Pluto conjunct Juno, sextile Neptune, trining Uranus, opposite Jupiter. So, three great powers supporting this process, and this process supporting those great powers. But what's not so obvious is that there are other players. In the same way that Jupiter conjuncts Pluto, Uranus is still conjuncting Sedna. So there's that intense, radical, free agent energy, which can bring up really ancient traumas, but move them really quickly. So here's the revolutionary Uranus in good aspect, getting creative, breaking up old Saturnian patterns, liberating energy, being able to support people to get a better balance between their individualism, the uniqueness of their individuals, and their primary relationships. So there's that support. Sextiles to Neptune. Okay, Neptune depends on whether he's in delusion mode or spiritual opening mode. but he lubricates our ability to surrender to deep processes, to trust enough to drop into, whether it's intimacy with a partner, whether in intimacy to self, whether connecting more deeply with the spirituality, the spiritual self. So Neptune supports by lubricating these processes. And then we have Jupiter over here, who's blasting all of them with his energy. Now, the Jupiter-Pluto, though, can be tricky, as we know, and certainly is being played out by Trump and every other alleged leader on the planet, just about, or at least, like misuse of power, power struggles. But healthy Jupiter is supporting his consort to transform with Pluto. And Pluto-Jupiter processes, if they're working well together, are the best we can have for personal evolution and transformation. But even Jupiter is not on his own. Jupiter's conjunct Psyche. So here's that goddess of soul-to-soul union. She's in the mix. She's offering that degree of openness along with Neptune. Neptune, Psyche combination, beautiful, beautiful openings, psychically, spiritually. And Hygeia. Jupiter is conjunct Hygeia. Here's Kundalini, goddess of healing, feminine counterpart Chiron. She is a tantric goddess. In India, she's Lalita, goddess of sacred sexuality. And she is a great purifier. She was the one who purified the toxic blood of Medusa to produce remedies so powerful to bring the dead back to life. So here's this other very powerful, positive, gracious, purificatory process. So this is such an awesome time, not just because of the basket, because of all these other factors. And why, certainly we're under a great deal of pressure, but, with the right mixture of therapeutic, embodied, and spiritual practices, our personal evolution, let alone our relationship evolution, is going to go in leaps and bounds. So it's really worthwhile engaging. Yeah. All right. In terms of support, some of this is all, some of this can be done with me. I'm getting quicker. The experiential astrology, if you haven't had experience of it, you can work with any of these archetypes. And particularly with someone like me who's got a therapeutic background, you can drop into those primal places and really work the territory. But anyone who's got even the most simplest form of experiential work, like voice dialogue, for instance, it's all embodied, energetic, potent stuff. Obviously, really good relationship counseling and therapy. Authentic tantra and intimacy work. You have to be careful around tantra. Like some of the neo-tantra traditions are not held with great integrity. There's a lot of distorted energy. There's a lot of power struggle stuff. There's your tantric predators, both male and female. There's so much room for misuse of energy there. So just be conscious if you're going to choose that path. Having said that, really authentic tantra practitioners are amazing and do very, very beautiful, very deep work, whether inside your own being and or with your partner. And one of the offshoots of contemporary Tantra is some exquisite intimacy work. And there are more and more practitioners around. And a lot of it is just being really, really present and in the moment. So there's an element of stillness and finding those places of being able to meet both self and others. And there's a woman called Cynthia Conop who runs Living Love in Byron Bay. We've been doing some exquisite work with her, for instance. They are around. If you want recommendations for practitioners with this, just let us know. And the Shiva Shakti traditions of India, as I said, there's a great book called Awakening Shakti by Wimple Sally Kempton, where she describes all the tantric Kundalini goddesses and provides mantras, meditations, visualizations. She was formerly a fully initiated monk in one of the great Shiva Shakti traditions. So, and thanks to Benjamin for inviting me this, because out of preparing for this, I've created a workshop to do in Sydney. Yeah. So yeah, that's a live experiential. We'll be working with these archetypes to further our relationship evolution. And it's not exactly on the last peak of the Jupiter-Juno, but it's still in the realms of.
Can you tell people maybe what to expect at something like that maybe you've never had any?
Okay. What happens is that it's not a teaching vehicle. We usually, over a weekend, we might work with 6 or 8 archetypes in a particular process. What happens is that we have we create a big zodiac wheel using cards and symbols that becomes basically a huge medicine wheel with cards representing the 12 signs of the zodiac. And say we're working with Juno, for instance. Everyone finds out the sign position of their personal Juno. We give them the Juno symbol. After some preparation work, which is usually like having a good dance and getting into our bodies, then everyone comes into the circle, puts the Juno position in front of the zodiac sign where she belongs, and we take people through a process of slowly stepping out towards that position of this particular goddess. And when done with the right preparation, what happens is that even looking at the symbols elicits responses in your body, you feel self, opens your intuition, and you start to get insight into how that part of yourself is operating or not operating. So that's a process in itself. That's a warm-up process. And then we get people out onto their position where they're literally standing over the Juno symbol. They're already fairly primed. We get them to tune into their body. At a certain level, they'll feel the energy of that part of self bubble up. And we'll either do some physical meditations work to shake or move to help move the energy, or put on some great dance music that resonates with it so that it welcomes this whole body. And if it's one of the stronger archetypes, or if there's trauma that arises out of this, whether your own or that which you carry from family sources, then people are encouraged to allow that to come up, give that sound and movement. So that supports the releasing. And particularly if you're working with things like Chiron or Pluto or the Black Moon, that stuff just can really, really surface in ways that you can do some amazing work, amazing releasing. So, yeah, it's very layered. And it opens people up energetically, intuitively, spiritually, and therapeutically, depending on each individual's availability. And you don't need to know anything about astrology, because it's all about finding out, well, what is this part of myself doing, wanting, needing, and how to work with it. So thanks for the question.
And will you be going through some more of the other archetypes and things like that? Like tonight's kind of exploration, would you be also looking at other goddesses?
Yeah. We're going to start with Jupiter and Juno as the foundation. Then we're going to work with Chiron and Hygeia, with the two great healers. And then that will roll on to working with Shiva and Parvati. And that's over 2 days. And in between the group work, we do individual vignettes with people. They go into a smaller version of the wheel to do some personal work. And there's sharing, there's other things that we add to. So it's quite energetic, but it ticks all the boxes. Yeah. Okay. Questions, comments?
I might stop sharing so you can see. Are you done presentation wise?
Yep.
And then we can just let the people at home will be able to see them as well.
Workshop. Where is it going to go? Flower Mill in Utah. Yeah. What date did I have? 17th, 18th, yeah.
Right, so we can see the people at home, but you can't see them up on that screen. If anybody at home has any questions, just unmute yourself, and Daniel's, I'm sure, happy to answer a few more. I actually have a question. You mentioned Hygeia and Medusa. I've never heard anything about that. Do you know more about?
Oh, that's yeah, that's awesome myth. Firstly, Hygeia was a student of Chiron's, and Hygeia is the daughter of Asclepius, who is also a student of Chiron's. And in the Medusa myth, as we know, like Medusa was so savage by the dark projections onto her, and she became progressively more and more toxic, as we know, and vengeful and enraged and turning men to stone, etc. And by the time she loses her head to Perseus, she is so toxic that to come in touch with a drop of her blood would kill you. Anyhow, after she loses her head, and the first thing that happens is out of her stump, she was pregnant when she was beheaded, and she births Pegasus, the winged horse, as well as another son.
Golden warrior.
Yeah. So these magnificent things emerge from her beheading. But after all the drama is over, who comes onto the scene quietly but this healing goddess Hygeia, who manages to safely gather up some of Medusa's blood, and then she worked it alchemically and turned it into a remedy so powerful could bring the dead back to life. So, yeah, awesome. Yeah, and And she's called a goddess of miraculous healing. And what that means is that she also reflects the organic healing intelligence in our bodies. And she also represents that kind of mechanism that I spoke about rolling from like a normal orgasm in a sexual context into a major healing experience. In primal therapy, for instance, which is dropping into whatever feelings are happening in your body, she's one of the patrons of that work. Because the more, you can drop out of your head and go into your feeling self and into your body, even if you can do it a little, your body will start to move, energy will start to move. And if you're feeling safe enough to roll with it, then you'll drop into these very deep primal level releases. That is also supported by this Hygeia energy. Yeah, she's really worth checking out as an archetype, particularly because we've got so much toxicity to deal with from so many different sources that like the Black Moon, who is like an much older sister, they support processes of purifying even the deepest of toxins. So that's good to know that they're on hand for when things get really, really tricky.
Daniel, just back on Juno and Pluto, I was just reminded during the talk tonight of some amazing scenes in Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson's movie, which is pretty full-on movie. But there's amazing scenes where the mother of the Christ is walking down one side of the street in a crowd, and then Satan's on the other side of the street. And Jesus is being dragged through the middle, being beaten and whipped, and then forced to carry the cross. And there's just these exchanges between the mother and Satan, like the protector and the destroyer. And it's like they recognize each other, and there's almost an acknowledgement, even though their agendas are kind of opposite. So, I'm just reminded of that because it's very powerfully done, It really struck me in the movie anyway. That interplay between those two forces. I was reminded of it tonight.
Yeah.
His next movie on that is going to be released on Good Friday next year.
Okay.
That's 3 days in London.
Yeah.
Between the crucifixion and the resurrection. Yeah, so that'll be very powerful. Talking of transformation.
Yeah, I'm ping-ponging all over the place with that. Thank you. One of my pet theories, particularly around Christ figure, and it kind of intuitively I've always felt like, Christ and Mary Magdalene were the sacred marriage, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was a physical tantric relationship. But it also had me thinking about, because in feminist traditions, Mary was already a fully initiated priestess. She had done so much work on herself and had purified and prepared herself. So by the time that they came together, she was really primed and open to him in a bit of the way that, like, Parvati prepared herself to be with Shiva. But an extension of what I felt is that, see, the Christian story is a Middle Eastern story. who were the dark goddesses in the Middle Eastern tradition? And there's Lilith. So my feeling is that Lilith was a part of this story, part of the preparation for Mary Magdalene to be ready for him, that she would have needed to have gone through those kind of death and rebirth transformations. Because in Lilith's story, you know, she goes through a number of transmutations and can actually be seen as a holder of the space for others to do so. So I'm seeing Lilith as a stepping stone to Mary Magdalene. And that fits with a lot of the Hindu connections because, for instance, and Parvati, the ultimate wife of Shiva, you know, she's a goddess of love. She's a great yogini. She's tough. She's really committed, beautiful. But if he pisses her off, she turns into Kali. Yeah. So there's a sense of, you know, reaching that level of evolution, you've got to go through these dark phases of purification of ancient toxins, whether they're your own or that which you carry from family, from culture, from trauma. So it's one of my pet themes. Yeah.
Well, Magdalene Dalian is from the tower. And Mag, when you look at Mag, it's the Magi.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of her name is telling you she's a Magi from the Zoroastrian Zarathustra tradition.
Okay.
I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't know, but
Yeah.
you know, because he had the Magi come and see him. But who were the Magi?
Oh yeah.
Zoroastrians, but they're the astronomer priests.
Yeah.
And her name is Magdalene, so she's a Magi.
Yeah. And she has an asteroid, Magdalena. Yeah. And we've worked with that asteroid directly. She's the real deal. Yeah. Mary Magdalene is also, according to Demetra George, included in the symbolism of the black moon.
Of the what?
Black moon. Yeah. So here's that connection with the Lilith or semi-Lilith archetypes. And
Any questions online?
anything? Oh, someone's got their hand up.
Okay.
Seen it?
No, that's us. That's us. I think we're good.
Get them?
No.
You asked them earlier, could they hear, couldn't you?
Yeah. I think everyone could hear. So
So Magdalene's all
beautiful. Thank you very much, Daniel. That was amazing. Always a pleasure.
Magi.
Thank you for the opportunity. I got as much out of this as I've given. In fact, I woke up at 2 a.m. and had a whole download needed to incorporate with this. So
Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
thank you everyone from home for being patient to hear most of that. Some good feedback too.
Yeah.
Thank you, dear ones. Good night.
Your workshop,
I'm all right.
it's not specifically, you don't have